Welcome again, all you wonderful heroes out there, members of the hero generation, no less. Just wanted to have a little chat, dive into how to create self-tracking tools for well-being, to use psychometrics to this end, which is cool. Really, really cool. Really can make a wonderful difference when you start getting this feedback into the system. Really just uplifts the level of well-being. It's a lovely thing. So we'll just have a little how do you create them? Well, I'm going to introduce two ideas, two ways of doing it. One is very interesting. So when you take recovery tracking tools, which I discussed in the last video, if you extend the scale, you end up in well-being. So let's it's really interesting. So if you think of the first three psychometrics I talked about in the last area: social role, interpersonal distress, social role functioning, and intrapersonal distress. So when we look at the three strong indicators of well-being, they're the same indicators, they're just advanced. So the one is personal well-being, and that's like if you take interpersonal distress, you push that out, it's personal well-being. And then the next one is intrapersonal distress. You push, that's close relationships, really. It's kind of the same thing, close relationships. The last is social role functioning. So social role functioning, when you push that out along the scale, you end up with social integration is what they call it in the research. So it's actually the same three things. Measure recovery, same psychometrics for well-being. They're just pushed further along the scale. So let me give you an example of how to push out the scale. You could say, how are your emotions and feelings if you want to look at interpersonal distress? And you could say very difficult, difficult, not so good, or okay. That's measuring the recovery scale. If we expand that out, we go from okay to good to doing great. Life's pretty wonderful. I'm really in a good place. It's the same scale. You just change the Likert scale. You're pushing it out and you're seeing what's on the top part of it. You could also talk about, so the other two then, so for example, for this distress, you would talk about feeling distressed, feeling stressed, feeling okay. That's kind of the Likert scale for recovery. But then stress, when you push it out, instead of feeling stress, you would say something, the idea would be around enjoying life. So it would go from being distressed to stressed to doing okay to life is good to enjoying life. So it's interesting. It goes from distress to enjoying it. That's the scale. And that's how you push it out and you get some new questions you can ask. So for those are the, so that's, for example, you get the first 5 psychometrics that I talked about in the previous video. And you just push out the scale. That's a nice way of doing it. Another way then, if you think about universal aspects of well-being, so it's a nice way to just think about them, feel inspired, check them out. And I'll give you 2 examples here. So if you think of relationships, I think we can say pretty much everybody, for a healthy relationship, for a relationship and a well-being, you think people would feel accepted, they'd feel understood, they'd feel supported, they'd feel respected in that relationship. So that's how I create the relationship tracker. And you just find a nice Likert scale to go with them, a nice question to go with them. You could break them out into 4 different questions. You could even just put it as one question, because the mind is amazing how it interprets these questions to make, when the mind looks at a psychometric, it assumes it makes sense and say, okay, let me understand this. Let me figure out what this is getting at. And it'll actually figure out a great answer for you. So that's an example of a universal aspect. Now, so let me get on to this particular tool that I find is just unbelievably easy, simple, powerful, just a wonderful tool in so many different ways. I call it the Role Wellbeing Tracker. And it asks about 2 things. You pick a role, how you're feeling at work, how you're feeling as being a part of a particular team, how you're feeling as being a student. I love using it when we get teams to take on a particular project at work. I get every member of the team to fill it out. Chat with them how they're doing, make sure they're in a good place with these questions. You can also use it as the average of where the team is at to make sure we're all in a good place, and we can do the highest and lowest on that and track that. So as a team, we kind of come together. it's nice for students. Asking a student about this, their role well-being as a student. It's nice for volunteers, for mentors, for people for your job role. It's lovely for supervising people. When I supervise people, I get them to fill out this and we have a chat about it, make sure they're in a good place. I like doing it monthly. You could do it more frequently or less frequently, whatever might work, but monthly is kind of sensible, kind of keeps you on track with things. And you basically ask them, how much are you enjoying that role? Like that could be not at all, a little, moderately, a lot, extremely, really enjoying it is an example of the Likert scale you could use. And the other one is how supported do you feel in that role? And again, you just use a simple Likert scale with it, and you can develop these scales with AI. You could have a chat with AI about how you want to develop the questions. But those just that simple, just really that simple to fill out, and people know the answer straight away. They'll just tell you. And if they don't, occasionally they might want to discuss it a bit and figure it out. And of course, it's always important to let people know they can have marks in between marks. So it's somewhere between okay and good. Well, just put it in between okay and good, which can be really cool, and just give them a half-point mark for that. Which brings us on to my favorite scale, which is the digital analog scale. So you have your digital, which is your 5 points. Your Likert scales can have 7 or 10, whatever, generally 5 or 4. Some of them have 4, which is nice. Or some of the scales I use just have 3 questions. Fantastic stuff. And then the analog part is you can have any point between those points can be chosen. Nice thing on it, you just have a little slider. And just be amazed now, people know, like, let's say between not so good and okay, they might say, well, I was not so good last week, but I'm a little bit closer now, but I'm not all the way up to okay, so I'm just a little bit under okay. It's really amazing how this analog digital scale can just get even more information and more sensitivity into the instrument. So that's a really cool idea. So where am I going now with this? So we have this role well-being questionnaire that we can use for all these different purposes. It works out great, just elevates. It's free, simple to do, easy to do, elevates workplaces, teams, students, mentors, make sure they're in a good place, volunteers. So just really love this tool. Once you start using it, you realize, how did we ever manage without it, really? You're onto something good then. So yeah, but where did it come from? Well, it kind of came out of 2 areas. One area was looking at universal aspects of well-being. So all different roles, and everybody wants to feel supported, and everybody wants to feel that they're enjoying it. I think if you put those 2 things together, you're thinking that's a pretty good. If those 2 things are happening, it's in pretty good place. Because I was thinking, what's the minimum amount of questions I can ask? And I got it down to 2. So I think if those 2 things are happening, it's a good indicator things are good. It covers a lot, really. You could also think it's extending the scales. It's actually, if you think of the 2-question recovery tracker, the role well-being tracker, in my mind, in my understanding, it extends those scales. So, for example, as I said, distress, stress, enjoying it. So it just asks about this upper part of the scale is all you're worried about in well-being, and it just asks about, let's get a little more. So there's the scale from distress to enjoying it, and what all we're doing is let's just focus on this enjoying piece, and let's just see where you are on that one. So that's the first question. And the next question is supported. So in recovery, we ask about how well supported do you feel in your recovery? But in well-being, it's like there's so many aspects to our well-being and so many roles we take on. It's just let's specify how well she's supported in a particular role. And it's really quite amazing. People have in their mind, they don't realize the different roles they have in life. They have that information inside them of how they're feeling about that particular role. It's quite a complex, amazing machine, this human mind. How are you doing in your role as a student, and how are you doing in your role as a volunteer, or how are you doing as a role in your part-time job, or how are you doing in your role as a group facilitator? Just pick a specific, maybe you have a job and one part of it is facilitating groups. You can say, how are you doing in that specific subsection of your job? And it's amazing. People have this information in their minds. That's one of the beautiful things about psychometrics, is we can get this information and we can then have a chart, and we can get some actually from not by interpreting the information that's already there, we get some new information. That's the whole beauty of it, that relates to a strong indicator of well-being in the role. Now, so let's take a look at this whole role well-being thing. Again, it indicates that. So let's just say I am supervising somebody at work. Let's just take a student. Let's take a student. And that student tells me, I don't feel supported at all to do as a student, to do well as a student. And I really don't enjoy coming to school at all. Well, that's a very good indicator that this is not going well. There may be some behavioral concerns, not good engagement, just not a good place. You don't want to have if all your students in the school are feeling that way, it's going to be a difficult school to manage. So it's an indicator that things are not well. And that can happen from time to time. It's not that there's something wrong. It can happen from time to time. And then you work, okay, well, let's have a chat. Let's see where things are at. Let's work on it. You enter this interesting dialogue of trying to improve things a little bit, week by week, little by little, improve it. Figure things out together, and if we're still working at this, and you might decide to use this particular tool with that student once a week for a chat. And hopefully after a few weeks, things are improving. Or if they're not, you're saying, you know what, we've been working on this now for 4 weeks and we're not getting anywhere. Let's mix it up. Let's get some new perspectives. Let's try some new ideas. And then if all the students who are saying, yeah, I really enjoy coming to school, I really feel I'm getting the support I need to do it, it's going to be a great school to manage. It's going to be in a state of well-being. How wonderful, and how easy to do that. And you could even get all the students to fill this out once a month, and then you would have a lovely average for your class and for your school. You'd know where you're at, and you'd have dialogues about how to get that to a good place. How cool is that? But also, as I said, the role well-being tracker has predictive value. If a student, someone's going to school and says, I really enjoy coming to school, I'm really getting the support I need to do my work. You could say this is a good predictor of how this student is going to do over the year, how they're even going to do in the long term. If they're enjoying this, it's like a good indicator of where things are going to be in the long term, and especially if it's staying at that level. So it has predictive value as well. And it's so easy to do. You sit down, and here's the thing, right, about this psychometrics, right? Every student wants to enjoy coming to school. Every student wants to feel they're getting the support they need to do well and to achieve things because they're human beings. So they all want to improve this score. And you just sit down, you collaboratively, you work on it together, and maybe you have some students who are mentors or well-being ambassadors or buddies or whatever. They can help them improve their score, or you could sit down with them, and all kinds of options. And even, a student could use this independently just for their own well-being. And also a parent could use this with their child that's going to school. So many options for using this tool in wonderful ways. It's so sensible. So I personally, I think it's one of my favorites. My favorites jumps around depending on what I'm working on. But God, this is one of the tools that I couldn't manage leaving it out. But there's lots of other ones out there. And you can just explore and find how they might be a wonderful part of your life.